I was working in London. I was actually in London for 6 years, and I was paying an extortionate amount of rent just like everybody else. And I was one of the ones who was actually living in a smaller place because I didn't have the money. If you've seen my video on being in debt, you will know my situation. And I decided obviously that I needed to get out of debt. And also, after I decided that I was getting out of debt, I decided, how can I actually live as cheaply as possible so I can get as much money behind me, so I can ultimately then quit my jobs, stop trading this time, and then go be free and go travel the world. So what I decided to do, at the time I was paying, when I first moved to London, for a tiny little bedroom in a shared apartment. I was living with 5 other people, shared bathroom, shared kitchen area, shared living area, all of this kind of stuff. And it was a dirty, horrible place. And I was paying £800 a month for that tiny little bedroom in Mile End. So what I decided to do was ultimately buy a van. Now, it's not everyone's cup of tea, as a perfect English way of putting it. But ultimately in life, you've got to make sacrifices to achieve what you want in life. And sometimes it's going to be difficult. And it was difficult for me as well, because I decided, instead of putting this money into rent, I'm going to just buy a box van. And it was literally a van with nothing in the back of it when I first bought it. I paid £7,250 for the van. I went into my overdraft to buy the van. I picked it up from Manchester. I drove it back to London. And I went on a website, Your Parking Space. And this allows you to ultimately just rent private parking spaces. I found a church ground in Mile End. I paid them £150 a month to rent a parking space. And I lived on that church ground for 18 months. I moved straight out of my apartment into the van. The first thing that I had in the van was a mattress. The second thing was a pillow. Then everything else came after that. But my bills then went from an average of around £1,000 a month, if you take rent, gas, electricity, council tax, all of this stuff, to my total bills per month worked out to be about £250 a month. And that's including my phone bill and everything like this. That is what I did to stop paying a huge amount of rent. That allowed me then to ultimately save money. And then the position that I found myself in, after basically 18 months of sacrifice, and 18 months flies by, trust me. And I was doing this in the winter when sometimes it was -5 in London. And there was no electricity in the van, there was no insulation, there was no heating. It didn't come with gas. There was absolutely nothing. I literally had candles for light, old school, Florence Nightingale style. So that's how I started. And then basically after 18 months, I did the calculations. I was averaging around, even if it's £800 a month on rent, which is very cheap, those people will know if you live in London, but it's the same as most major cities in the world. If you calculate that on a yearly basis, you're paying £9,600 per year. Over a 2-year period, that's £18,000 just gone, vanished into thin air, just for you to live in that position, in that apartment, or wherever it is that you're living. So instead of me then putting £18,000 over a 2-year period and it just vanishing on rent, that £18,000 then allowed me to pay for the van, completely kit out the van, and then all of a sudden, in an 18-month to 2-year period, I find myself in a position where now, actually, this van that I'm living in is much bigger than this single bedroom that I was living in anyway. I can now live on my own. I don't have to have a shared toilet or shared bathroom or anything like this. I don't have to have a shared living area, a shared kitchen. I can cook what I want. And then actually what I decided to do, if you think about it, a lot of people who have these or work in this 9 till 5, like me, a lot of it really is just to sustain this lifestyle. And a lot of that sustaining this lifestyle is ultimately just so you can pay for your rent, just so you can keep going. A lot of the work that you're doing in your job if it's anything like me, and I think a lot of people are like me, you're literally doing that job just so you can pay for your rent, pay for your bills, pay for your food, so you can then still turn up to that job. And I decided this is a vicious circle, and this is not what I want anyway. I don't want to keep working a 9 till 5 job. I don't want to be trading all of these hours. I'd much rather be free. Yes, I love living in London, don't get me wrong, it was a cool place to live, but my time was over there, and I decided ultimately the world is a much bigger place than the city that I was currently living in. So that's what I decided to do. You can do the same thing. I was literally doing that. Well, literally a year ago today, I was living in a church ground in Mile End in London. I was turning up to my job. I was selling property to investors. Yes, it's completely ironic. A property investment consultant who lives in a van. That's me. And I decided to make that sacrifice because ultimately I didn't want to be doing that anymore. There's a lot more of the world to see. I wanted to be a lot more free, and taking that decision to ultimately try and shake off the system, get out of the system, so I could save as much money as I possibly could, and then ultimately quit my job and go traveling the world and be free to live in my van. And that's exactly what I've done. So you can do exactly the same thing. And if I show you now, there's the beast in the background, and there's my girlfriend also doing YouTube. And I may show you something because I think it was in 2019 in March, I wrote in the diary at the time that I wanted to do YouTube, and I said ultimately, Simon, just be yourself. And here I am 5 years later doing exactly that. And that's because I made a few sacrifices, and now here I am on top of the world in this beautiful place, Montenegro. Definitely visit it if you haven't. Living free and doing what I want. It wasn't easy, but it was absolutely worth it. On the next video, I will show you how you can live this lifestyle extremely cheaply as well. And ultimately, I want to help people be free and be happy. None of this nonsense on making money. All about being free, being happy, and doing what you want in life. So that's what I did to get myself out of that situation, to get myself out of the rat race, that continuous, endless circle. You can do the same. It's going to require sacrifice, but it will be worth it, I promise. So hopefully this has helped, and yeah, I will see you guys on the next video. Live free and live happy, my people. I want to go back to my van, and that's the view in the morning.